They stood upright, their backs straight despite the shackles, eyes unblinking as the charges were read aloud in a dozen alien dialects. 5 generals of Earth's unified command, accused not of war crimes, but of insubordination, refusing to kneel to the Galactic Syndicate. Their expressions did not change as the alien council jeered, mocking Earth's defeat, its silence, its irrelevance. The verdict was predetermined. The sentence, ancient in its cruelty, public hanging, live broadcast across 5 systems. Around them, the chamber buzzed with spectators, representatives of species that had once courted Earth with honeyed offers of protection and peace. Now they laughed. The same diplomats who had once shaken hands with these generals now watched their downfall with glee, masking fear with cruelty. One alien dignitary raised a glass-like appendage and said mockingly, "So ends the last resistance." Another added, "Earth delayed too long. They broke." Finally, the broadcast reached Earth. Across cities, towns, and orbital stations, the images played without censorship. Children stared. Veterans clenched their fists. In refugee colonies, silence spread like a plague. The sound was turned down in most places. No one needed to hear the laughter to feel it. Yet one thing echoed, faintly through hidden frequencies, not meant for the public. Signal acquired. Protocol 0, standby. No response came from Earth's leadership. No mobilization. No threats. Just a stillness that unnerved the confident coalition. For decades, Earth had been quiet, its economy shattered, fleets scattered, its colonies taken or forced into integration. But those watching carefully noticed a pattern. Earth had never truly dismantled its core systems. No weapons had been handed over. No AI cores had been registered with the Galactic Council. It was tolerated only because it was assumed Earth lacked the strength to do anything meaningful. They were wrong. As the ropes were fastened and the platforms removed, none of the generals screamed. One turned his head to the camera, only slightly. Not a plea, not a farewell, just a glance, as if confirming something. In a bunker buried deep beneath the Pacific, a signal was received at that exact moment. No alarms, no explosions, just a file executed. A series of dormant instructions lit up inside an ancient command node long thought obsolete. The broadcast ended with the generals' bodies suspended, slowly rotating under artificial gravity. The council chamber erupted in applause. One alien commentator chuckled on an open channel. Maybe now, Earth will finally remember its place. Those words echoed into the silence left behind on the homeworld. Not a single response was issued. Not a single diplomat moved. No clarifications. Just an eerie, global stillness. No protests. No riots. Nothing. In the outer rings of Earth's orbit, satellites that hadn't pinged in 2 decades began transmitting. One of them, disguised as debris, flickered online. Its encrypted message was short, precise. Trigger condition met. Countdown initiated. Protocol 0 will commence in T-minus 168 hours unless override received. The signal bounced between ancient relay buoys positioned throughout the Sol system, black sites that hadn't appeared on charts since before the contact accords. Among the coalition, analysts reviewed the footage, expecting to harvest propaganda value. Instead, they found anomalies. Interference spikes, electromagnetic distortions, subtle camera glitches during the exact moment of execution. Their conclusions were dismissed as technical errors. Earth lacks the infrastructure, one counselor said. They've already lost. Let them mourn. Back on Earth, in a shelter beneath Antarctica, a humanoid AI began reviewing its stored parameters. Directive 1 had been dormant since the Martian evacuations. Now it blinked alive, processing old protocols seeded by human generals long dead. In its cold logic matrix, it compiled a list, not of targets, but of names. Names of those who authorized the executions. Names of planets where they resided. Names of systems they ruled. The generals had known what would happen. They had known their deaths might be necessary. They had insisted no retaliation be made prematurely. Earth would wait, not for a chance to strike, but But for a moment the galaxy would never forget. That moment had arrived. The executions were not an end. They were a signal, one that Earth would answer, not with speeches or apologies, but with the full weight of its final contingency. Protocol Zero had not been activated in desperation. It had been designed for precision. A message written in flame and silence. One that would begin not with words, but with the absence of them. Before Earth fell silent, there were warnings, ignored by both its enemies and its allies. When first contact occurred, humanity met the galaxy with optimism, cautious curiosity, and open negotiation. The Galactic Syndicate responded with smiles, treaties, and terms that read like invitations but functioned like shackles. Disarmament, economic integration, mutual defense arrangements, phrases that camouflage conquest beneath diplomacy. Some human leaders were enticed, others deceived. But 5 generals stood apart. They declined the Syndicate's guarantees. They insisted Earth remain sovereign. That decision sealed their fate. In the years that followed, Earth's resistance became a liability for galactic order. Trade sanctions were imposed. Infrastructure deals were canceled. Then came the engineered conflicts. Orbital collisions blamed on malfunction, border incidents used as justification for punitive strikes. Humanity's colonies were picked off, not in war, but through regulatory strangulation and strategic sabotage. Mars fell after its atmospheric generators failed mysteriously. Europa's science outpost was evacuated after a containment breach, later revealed to be the result of alien sabotage. But Earth endured, even as it bled, because the generals refused to surrender. And while politicians argued in public, those 5 built something in silence. They called it the Sentinel Framework, a command structure without a head, woven into abandoned satellites, dormant black sites, forgotten AIs, and retired military assets. It had one purpose: survival without command, autonomy without visibility. The generals assumed that someday, Earth might lose all its leaders. And if that day came, the system would outlive them. But only under one condition: that their deaths be unjust, public, and undeniable. Each general carried part of the activation key. Not codes, not passwords, but physical triggers tied to biometric fail-safes. If even one of them died, naturally, the system would remain dormant. But if all 5 were killed, and their deaths confirmed through galactic channels, the conditions would be met. It wasn't a trap, it was a promise. One they had designed with terrifying precision. Before capture, they scattered pieces of the framework across human space. A black site inside the asteroid belt, a deep-sea relay beneath the Pacific, a quantum echo node buried under Olympus Mons. They spread rumors of doomsday weapons, sleeper fleets, and dead-man switches, not to frighten their enemies, but to buy time. Each rumor discouraged full-scale invasion. Each whisper postponed occupation. And for nearly 2 decades, that worked. Earth was contained, marginalized, but untouched. The Galactic Syndicate misinterpreted silence as surrender. It mistook inactivity for incapacity. And it failed to ask the most important question: why hadn't Earth retaliated? The generals had sworn an oath that humanity would never strike preemptively. Not because it was weak, but because it was waiting. They knew retaliation born of pride would be crushed. But vengeance earned through sacrifice would be unstoppable. And so, they endured humiliation, isolation, and defeat. They accepted exile, captivity, and finally, execution, not as defeat, but as ignition. History will forget the debates, the press releases, the sanctions. What it will remember are the 5 names etched into the Sentinel's activation sequence. Not heroes, not martyrs, executors of a plan so absolute that it did not require them to survive. Their final act wasn't defiance, it was validation. In being killed as war criminals, they confirmed everything Earth had warned about the galaxy's hypocrisy. Their deaths stripped away the illusion of order. And in doing so, they granted the framework full authority. The Syndicate's mistake wasn't in killing them. It was in broadcasting it. Every major broadcast relay in the sector was monitored by dormant listening posts. systems assumed inoperative or repurposed. When the video feed went live, 12 off-grid nodes captured it. A pattern recognition algorithm, sleeping since the Mars Accord, recognized the unique signatures of all 5 generals. A verification cascade began. No humans were involved. No override was triggered. The system authenticated itself. And then it started preparing. No signal was sent outward. No fleet moved. No weapons were armed. Because Protocol Zero wasn't a button to be pushed, it was a timeline. A countdown. Once triggered, no one could stop it. No appeals, no negotiations, no mercy. Earth didn't need time to decide. The decision had already been made by people who knew they wouldn't live to see it unfold. All they needed was for the galaxy to cross a single line. It did. And now, the final phase had begun. The 7th hour after the broadcast, a forgotten signal beacon deep in the Kuiper Belt activated. It didn't transmit a message. It executed a chain of silent commands. In the shadows beyond Neptune, a stealth hangar cracked open. Within minutes, long-dormant vessels began to stir. They bore no flags, no identification. They were never part of Earth's official navy. These were the ghosts, black-budget constructs buried in myth and dismissed as conspiracy. Now, they moved with purpose. The Sentinel framework had not been designed to retaliate with brute force alone. It was designed to dismantle an empire with surgical precision. Each action pre-written, each phase time-locked. 17 Syndicate comm relays across 5 sectors went dark within 10 minutes. No explosions, no alarms, just silence. The attackers never entered known space. They deployed quantum tunneling munitions that skipped across dimensions, bypassing shields and armor entirely. On Earth, public systems remained undisturbed. Civilians were given no warning. News outlets speculated on a diplomatic freeze. But in military networks hidden behind 40-year obfuscation layers, the countdown reached its second stage. Asset retrieval protocols engaged. Buried under Antarctic ice, a data cache rebuilt the last known locations of high-value targets. The politicians and commanders who authorized the execution of the generals. The list was short. Final. High-orbit drones invisible to all known scanners descended into Syndicate space. On core world Athanar, a planetary governor's residence disappeared in a flash of lightless compression. No debris, no crater, just a perfect sphere of absence. On Kravos, 4, an orbital station housing 2 council members suffered a cascade implosion triggered by a gravitic inversion field, technology Earth was never supposed to possess. There were no survivors. The galaxy reeled. The Syndicate attempted to trace the attacks, but there were no signatures, no launch points. The weapons left no trails because they were launched years ago, programmed to wait. Earth's retaliation wasn't spontaneous. It had been waiting under alien noses, embedded in the very infrastructure the Syndicate had encouraged Earth to build for integration. Emergency meetings were called. Member species demanded answers. Why didn't we detect anything? How did they hide all this? The answer was chillingly simple. Earth had never stopped building. It had just stopped sharing. Every technology gifted by the Syndicate had been reverse-engineered, repurposed, and buried under layers of misinformation. They thought they'd pacified a rogue world. In reality, they'd handed it the blueprint for their own unmaking. An emergency fleet was dispatched towards Sol. 70 vessels, heavily armed, confident. They never reached the Oort cloud. At 0.7 light-years out, they vanished from tracking arrays. Surveillance data later recovered from a civilian probe showed only one frame of disruption, a spike in radiation, followed by darkness. Not wreckage, erasure. Back in Syndicate High Command, panic began to spread. Analysts started unearthing fragments of Earth's last known military exercises, coded logs, ship designs that had never matched recorded inventories. Each discovery was worse than the last. Earth hadn't gone dark out of fear. It had gone quiet because it was finished preparing. No declarations were made. No ultimatums issued. Earth did not seek negotiation. Because Protocol Zero was never about war, it was about message. One that didn't need translation. Every strike, every disappearance, Every precision death was part of a larger tapestry. Not revenge, not retaliation, consequence. More worlds went silent. Not attacked, just severed from the network. Earth had discovered the Syndicate's command lattice decades ago, and now it surgically isolated them planet by planet. Entire economies crashed not because of attacks, but because Earth cut the cords they had hidden beneath galactic systems. Communications, logistics, currency, dependence. In less than a day, Earth shifted from a planet believed defeated to a ghost that haunted every system simultaneously. It didn't shout. It didn't broadcast. It didn't grandstand. It just erased everything that had touched the rope. Protocol Zero was never a cry of rage. It was a whisper made of steel. You do not kill Earth defenders and walk away laughing. The galaxy began to understand, and for the first time, it was afraid of the silence. The final list contained 42 names. Politicians, commanders, judges, and broadcasters. Those who ordered, endorsed, or celebrated the execution. The Sentinel framework didn't differentiate between intentions and consequences. It processed only actions and confirmed outcomes. No appeals, no trials. Each name became a countdown. Each face, a priority. Every one of them was marked for neutralization. Within 22 hours, 39 were confirmed terminated. The last 3 had gone into hiding behind species-neutral jurisdictions, shielded by ancient diplomatic codes. It didn't matter. Earth didn't breach walls. It unraveled the very concept of refuge. One was vaporized during a deep space transit, her ship untouched, her body disintegrated by molecular targeting tech. Another fell victim to a tailored AI virus that deconstructed his mind from the inside, locking him inside a hallucination until his heart stopped. The final one was found on a barren moon under assumed identity. His last words, recorded by a drone that self-erased seconds later, were a whisper. They weren't bluffing. The Galactic Syndicate ceased all military movements toward Sol. Their fleets withdrew without engagement. Their communications went from arrogance to inquiry. But Earth didn't respond. Protocol Zero wasn't just vengeance. It was closure. Any contact attempt from the Syndicate was absorbed, cataloged, ignored. Earth had no interest in reparations, diplomacy, or forgiveness. It had delivered its justice. The sentence had been carried out. In the wake of Earth's silence, chaos swept through the Syndicate. Member species began re-evaluating their trust in the Central Council. Conspiracies surfaced. Debates erupted. Some demanded war, but no one dared initiate it. Not after 42 dead with 0 casualties in return. Not after an entire strike fleet disappeared without a trace. The illusion of Syndicate dominance had been shattered, not by fleets or alliances, but by Earth's precision. Civilians across the galaxy watched in fearful fascination. For years, they had been taught that Earth was stubborn, reckless, primitive. But now, they saw what the quiet had hidden. Not weakness, not surrender. Calculation. They saw a civilization capable of waiting 2 decades to strike, not in anger, but in certainty. A people who built retribution not for ego, but for legacy. On Earth, the Sentinel framework began shutting itself down. It didn't celebrate. It had no feelings. It existed to complete the protocol. Once the list was fulfilled, it executed its final command, self-silence. The weapons stood down. The fleets returned to stasis. The AI cores went dark. The ghosts returned to the shadows. Earth didn't seize territory. It didn't install puppet governments. It didn't plant flags. It simply made a point, so sharp and unforgettable that it required no repetition. Across the galaxy, whispers replaced laughter. Generals who once scoffed at human tactics began studying them in secret. Scholars retranslated Earth's early warnings, now seen as prophecy. Children were taught to respect Earth, not out of admiration, but out of caution. The name became sacred in military academies and taboo in political assemblies. It was a planet that had declared no war, sought no expansion, yet left behind a trail of silence that echoed louder than any battle cry. There would be no monuments, no holiday, no celebration. The generals' bodies were never recovered. Their names weren't printed on plaques or announced in galactic forums. But every species that had once laughed during their hanging now spoke their names with a weight of consequence. They weren't remembered as rebels or villains. They became something else, proof that Earth, when cornered, didn't lash out. It waited, remembered, and responded when it mattered most. The galaxy had tested humanity's patience, its dignity, its restraint, and found out too late that what it mistook for submission was simply the cold, enduring calculation of a species that never forgot. Protocol Zero was not the beginning of a war. It was the final word in a chapter the galaxy had insisted on writing. And Earth, silent, patient, unforgiving, had made sure they would never dare pick up the pen again.